is Krista Bontrager. I want to thank you for watching, and I'm here with my friend and visiting scholar, Dr. Nick Tavani. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
And I want to introduce you to our viewers if they're not familiar with you. You are an MD, you're a family practice doctor, but you also have a PhD in biophysics and physiology.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So very unique, MD and PhD. And I think we're going to have a great time talking about a very fascinating topic today about transparency and the design of transparency. You know, when I think about Psalm 19, I know that's one of my favorite Bible passages, probably yours too. And it says that the heavens declare the glory of God. But an insight that you kind of have brought to my attention is that when we observe the heavens, we're taking it for granted a whole bunch of coincidences that need to take place in order for me just to begin to observe the heavens. So let's get into that and talk about transparency.
Okay, well, it started when I was doing my laundry. Okay, and I noticed that the laundry detergent was clear. I go, that's clear. How does that happen? And when I looked at the chemical process that makes clear things like that, it was very complicated and complex, and it's very valuable. And if there's anything contaminating, it's not worth much. So that got me thinking about transparency. I realized our vision is dependent on everything being clear so the photons, the light can get through. And I started out in outer space. And I realized, because I read Reasons to Believe things, that outer space is clear for reasons. And one of them is because the photons were able to escape after the Big Bang, and we see that as a cosmic background radiation. But I'm going to move ahead there. I'm going to look at galaxies. Turns out that galaxies have gas, which would block any light coming out. But a study that I found, this is what in my research that I looked at, they realized that there are starburst galaxies that have massive stars that when they explode, they clear gas like in a cone shape. And that's why we're able to see clearly in galaxies. Plus, as anyone who reads Hugh Ross knows, as the Earth is centered in the right place in the galaxy between arms. So we're in an area just happened to be where we can see when we look up at the sky. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see the glory of the sky. Then I realized, so the light gets to Earth. It turns out the Earth hasn't always had a clear atmosphere either. At the beginning, it was foggy and cloudy, and because of organisms that came onto the Earth, oxygen filled the atmosphere, and that has something to do with the clearing and the transparency of the atmosphere. So those things all had to happen. And
so on the big macroscopic level, there's a lot of kind of unlikely coincidences that have to happen to ensure transparency is going to get to the Earth.
That's right, all the way down to our atmosphere. And then even in the telescope lens, you have a special optical glass that requires a certain chemical using silicon that makes it clear enough for us to see. So all of that, and now we just got to the eye. I was thinking about all that. I said, this is something I've always taken for granted, but transparency is incredible.
It really is, because all of these kind of coincidences or unlikely events, each one of them could have been interrupted at any time.
Yes.
That would have prevented transparency from taking place. I've never even considered
whoever thought of that.
The optical part of the telescope that's needed for me to even look out into the heavens. But as a medical doctor, tell me about the eye. Like, what needs to happen in the eye? Well,
again, when I was in the office, I'm using my ophthalmoscope and thinking, I've got to look all the way to the retina. And then I looked up what are the layers it has to go through. And this is all protein. You have, first of all, the cornea, and that's got 5 layers in it. I'll talk about the most important one. The stroma is about 90% of it is thick. It's made of strands, 200 to 300 of them, that all have to be perfectly lined up for the cornea to be clear. Then you have other layers in there that slough off every week. Another one gets thicker as you get older. That has to remain clear. Then you have the lens, which has to be flexible to refract the light. It just so happens light is refractable. That's another coincidence. And then it finally gets through the ocular fluids, which are made of water. You have the aqueous and the vitreous. The vitreous is mainly protein. And even though it's 98% water, I found out something really interesting about the vitreous that I wanted to share. But what about water? Why is water clear? Did you ever think about that?
I've never thought about that.
I didn't either, and I looked that up. That's like really deep physics. You have to go into that. Talk to Jeff about that one. But that water is clear is another thing that we take for granted. But all of these things now have to be clear for us to see. Then I discovered this protein. It's called a chaperone protein that doesn't actually function with the others, but it assists the other proteins. It's called alpha-beta crystalline. It looks like a pretzel to me in the picture. But if that wasn't there, especially under stress conditions, like it's a heat shock protein, those proteins would clump, and all that light, all that travel, that distance that the light did, it wouldn't be able to get through to your retina because it would be clumped. Now, where did that little protein come from? Why did that show up? How did that get there? I think my point is not only that these are designed, the system is designed for a vision, but I don't have a good explanation for how this just happens in nature at the levels of complexity. Do you?
No, and it's what really strikes me is that you need a series of these things. It's not just one thing.
Right.
It's potentially hundreds of things that have to happen from the macro level, the universe level, the physics level, all the way down to the protein level in my eye. All of that has to come together in just the right sequence, in just the right way. And anything could go wrong at any time. And I wouldn't be able to study the heavens. I wouldn't be able to ascertain that the heavens declare the glory of God.
It's amazing that we are seeing each other through a clear air right now.
Yeah.
And little things like this, when you begin to appreciate it and put it together, you realize what a wonderful thing creation is. And there's someone behind it. There's some, to my mind, intelligence putting it together.
That's such a great point, because I think that even going back to your inspiration of the laundry detergent and looking at the clearness, the transparency of it, we mimic something that God has put in nature.
Yeah, yes.
And that is also a very fascinating thing to reflect on.
I hope that, we can appreciate our vision more. But a verse came to mind, I think as Paul said, that now we see through a glass dimly, but someday we'll see face to face. And as I was thinking about those who don't really appreciate the design of our creation and universe and our bodies, I think someday we're all going to see more clearly.